the abuser's gain and the survivor's loss. Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Occult Families How to Spot Them series. Trigger warning. This video series covers disturbing and very serious topics. Full legal disclaimer in the video description below. Ritual abuse is not just cruelty. It is a system of energetic economics. Every act serves a function. Every violation has a yield. In occult families, abuse is not merely about power or pathology. It is about harvesting. The abuser extracts energy. The survivor loses access to their own. Energetic transfer. What the abuser gains. In metaphysical systems, energy is currency. When abuse is committed, especially sexual, emotional, or ritual abuse, it creates an energetic discharge. The survivor releases life force through pain, fear, shame, or orgasm. That energy doesn't disappear. It is absorbed, directed, fed upon. This process is known as energetic transfer, the siphoning of spiritual power from one being to another. The abuser often gains power, a temporary surge of vitality or magnetism, control, influence over the survivor's decisions, boundaries, and voice ritual status, elevation within the occult family structure by offering energy or sacrifice. This is spiritual theft. The abuser builds their influence not just through manipulation, but by literally feeding on the stolen light of others. What the survivor loses. The survivor, by contrast, often loses access to intuition, memory voice, confidence, sexual sovereignty. These are not just psychological side effects. They are deliberate outcomes of ritual engineering. When energy is extracted through trauma, the victim becomes spiritually disoriented, easier to control, program, and silence. Their gifts are hijacked, and their path is rerouted to serve the family system. Spiritual laundering. One of the most sinister mechanisms used by abusers is spiritual laundering. This is the occult practice of using a pure or chosen soul as a vessel to absorb, neutralize, or cleanse the negative karma of the abuser or bloodline. The survivor becomes a container, absorbing the burdens that the abuser refuses to carry. This often shows up as the scapegoat child taking on the illness, shame, or bad fortune of the parent. The sensitive or gifted sibling being used to carry the emotional weight of the entire family. A survivor experiencing inexplicable cycles of suffering that do not originate from their own choices. These patterns are not symbolic. They are metaphysical transactions, rituals of burden displacement that result in spiritual exhaustion, illness, or life derailment for the survivor. The concept of rising through ruin. Survivors of ritual abuse are often told some version of the following lie. You're special because you endured this. This is a manipulation of the spiritual principle that pressure forms diamonds. In occult families, the child who survives the most pain is often groomed to believe their abuse was a kind of initiation, a twisted honor. This is called the false initiation. Ritual abusers reframe suffering as purpose. Survivors are told they're chosen, anointed, or ascended because they made it through. But this narrative hides the theft. It distracts from the truth, that someone else profited from their ruin. To reclaim power, the survivor must tell the truth. My suffering was engineered. My energy was taken. My gifts were misused. But now, I re-enter the system as my own authority, not a vessel for theirs. True spiritual growth does not require betrayal. Ascension does not require abuse. Power does not require pain. Survivors of ritual abuse are not just healing from trauma. They are exiting a system that used their body, energy, and story for its own elevation. And once the extraction stops, the rebuilding begins. You were not meant to rise through ruin. You were meant to rise once the ruin was removed. How consent is bypassed in ritual systems. In spiritual law, consent governs access. Every energetic exchange, whether physical, emotional, or metaphysical, requires permission to be valid. But within occult systems, particularly those sustained by generational ritual abuse, consent is not honored. It is bypassed. The mechanics of bypass consent are not accidental. They are engineered. These families understand that if they cannot get clear, enthusiastic agreement, they must create conditions where protest is impossible. Once the victim is silenced, shocked, altered, or confused, the system proceeds as though consent was granted. This is ritual fraud. And yet, in metaphysical law, even fraudulent contracts can hold until challenged. This is why so many survivors feel spiritually trapped by agreements they never consciously made. Definitions. Before we begin, spiritual law, a metaphysical system of cause and effect that governs energetic access, agreements, and sovereignty. It supersedes man-made law in occult systems. In spiritual law, silence can be counted as consent unless directly revoked. Energetic contract, a non-physical agreement made between beings, spoken, implied, or ritualized, regarding access to energy, identity, or destiny. Proxy agreement, a spiritual contract made by one person, typically a parent, priest, or handler, on behalf of another, often without their knowledge or consent. Dream manipulation, The use of altered states, dreams, astral travel, or unconscious visions to gain spiritual agreement or renew contracts under deceptive conditions. Trauma-based consent, capture. The process of inducing pain, fear, or dissociation to spiritually override a person's free will, allowing a contract to be installed without their conscious participation. Core mechanisms of consent bypass. 1. Silence as consent. When a child is harmed and does not scream, fight, or run, the system interprets their stillness as agreement. But a child's silence is survival, not consent. In spiritual law, this creates false consent unless it is later revoked. 2. Consent. During dissociation or unconsciousness. Many rituals are performed when the victim is in an altered state, unconscious, drugged, asleep, or frozen in fear. This trauma-based consent capture is a core tool in ritual abuse. If a declaration is made over the body, such as "she belongs to this lineage" or "he is ours," it can bind the victim energetically, even if they never heard it. 3. Agreements in the dream realm. Survivors often report dreams in which they nodded, recited vows, or participated in ceremonies. These are not always symbolic. The dream realm is a spiritual domain where consent can be harvested if not actively opposed. Voice mimicry, trickery, or emotional pressure are used to extract agreement. These rituals must be revoked as real. 4. Family loyalty framed as agreement. In ritual families, obedience is often reframed as honor. Children are told to repeat phrases, wear ritual objects, or perform acts out of love. But many of these acts are actually agreements. Example, saying, "I will always serve this family" sounds benign, but it is ritual language that can bind the speaker to spiritual contracts of service, sacrifice, or submission. 5. Proxy contracts made on your behalf. Parents or elders may offer a child to the system. This could sound like, "I dedicate this child to our ancestors," or "she will continue our line." These are proxy agreements, and while spiritually illegal, they stand until revoked. Often these contracts involve physical tokens like hair, blood, or placenta, making the agreement ritualized even if the child is absent. How to break these contracts. Because these agreements are energetic, breaking them requires spiritual precision. This is not metaphor. It is metaphysical procedure. Step 1. Name the contract. You do not need the full history. Say, "Any contract made in my name, by silence, confusion, dream, or proxy, I name it now." Step 2. Declare it invalid. Due to fraud. In spiritual law, a fraudulent contract has no true power once it is named. I revoke all agreements made under duress, fear, unconsciousness, or confusion. These were not contracts. They were violations. Step 3. Revoke consent and sever access. I revoke all consent. I withdraw my energy from every contract, ritual, lineage, or system that does not serve my highest authority. I cut all cords, erase all signatures, and reclaim my spiritual domain. These statements may be spoken aloud, written, or included in spiritual ceremony. They must be direct. No ambiguity. Spiritual contracts do not respond to politeness. They respond to power. Final note. Many survivors carry guilt for the roles they unknowingly agreed to. But confusion is not agreement. Silence is not agreement. Shock is not agreement. Being a child is not agreement. Every contract made in violation of your sovereignty can be broken. And once it is, your energy is no longer theirs to use. Spiritual freedom begins with revocation. And spiritual authority begins the moment you say, "I never agreed, and I do not agree now." Breaking the cycle. Reclaiming the self. Spiritual contracts formed through ritual abuse do not dissolve on their own. They must be consciously broken, revoked, and replaced with new declarations that reflect true sovereignty. This chapter outlines the practical and metaphysical steps to void fraudulent agreements, retrieve fragmented aspects of the self, and close the energetic openings that once gave ritual systems access to your field. Key terms before we begin. Void contract. A declaration that a contract is spiritually null and void due to how it was created, through fraud, force, trauma, or deception. Soul fragment retrieval. The process of reclaiming parts of one's consciousness or energy that were split off during trauma, often trapped in specific memories, ages, or altered identities. Field sealing. A spiritual and energetic act of closing open portals, cords, and access points to prevent further spiritual infiltration. Declaration of sovereignty. A formal spoken or written statement affirming that one's energy, will, and body are no longer available for use by external systems or contracts. Step 1. Void the contract. Any spiritual agreement made without full consent must be declared invalid. This begins with a firm, clear statement. I declare all contracts, agreements, and rituals made in my name, without my conscious, informed, and sovereign consent, as spiritually null and void. You may add specific references to types of abuse or situations. I void every agreement made through trauma, silence, ritual obedience, dream manipulation, or family loyalty. Naming the nature of the fraud begins the legal undoing in the spiritual realm. Step 2. Reclaim the fragmented self. Ritual systems do not only steal energy, they fragment the individual. Each dissociative event, role assignment, or spiritual violation can create a split. These splits often hold the trauma memory, the emotional imprint, or even the ritual programming. To retrieve these lost or trapped aspects, I call back every part of myself that was taken, splintered, silenced, or exiled during trauma. I welcome back all aspects of my soul and consciousness, no matter how long they have been gone. You may visualize the return. Speak it into water, into a mirror, or write it in a letter to yourself. You are calling your energy back from every false altar it was placed upon. Step 3. Seal the field. Once contracts are voided and soul parts are retrieved, the energetic field must be sealed. This is spiritual hygiene and spiritual security. I close every portal, cord, tether, and doorway that was opened through spiritual manipulation. I remove all permission for re-entry. My field is sealed. My energy is sovereign. Use elements if helpful: salt, fire, smoke, prayer, or sound. The tool is secondary to the clarity of command. This step protects against ritual reattachment. Step 4. Final reclamation and refusal to repeat. The cycle ends when the contract ends, and the patterns no longer repeat. This must be claimed out loud. I reclaim my timeline. I reclaim my identity. I reclaim my voice, body, and destiny. I refuse to reenact these patterns. I refuse to serve as a vessel for another's gain. I am no longer bound. Make this declaration clear, spoken, and final. Ritual systems thrive on hesitation and vagueness. Your clarity is the ritual now. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start: the black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation and leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.